He asks me this question, and I think he was in first grade. And I was kind of taken aback. And I said, why do you ask me that? He was just like, I don't know. I want to know if we're poor. And I told him, I said, we are not poor. I said, and the reason why we're not poor is because we have clothes on our back, we have food on the table, we have a roof over our head, and we have each other. I said, and so long as we have that, we are never poor. And it goes to your point, Bill, of your mindset, because my kids, thankfully, they've never been the kind of kids where they want the signature fancy sneakers or blue jeans. Like even now, my daughter's in college and she loves going to the secondhand store. My son's a minimalist, like none of this, to him, it's more stuff to keep track of and he doesn't want to do that. So it really just came down to it and it became like the mantra.
Welcome to Catching Up to FI, a podcast on mindset, money, and life for late starters of any age on their journey to financial independence. I'm Bill, and I'm a late starter.
I'm Jackie, and I'm also a late starter, and we're your host. We're here to help you on your journey to financial independence, no matter where you're starting.
We're going to talk to experts, other late starters, and explore topics related to our mission.
Join us as we catch up to FI together.
Hello and welcome back to Catching Up to FI. I'm Bill Yount with my esteemed co-host, Jackie Cummins-Koski. She's fresh off the road from a conference in, I believe it was Columbus, Ohio. Jackie, what were you doing this week?
Yeah, it was in Columbus, Ohio, and I hold a credential that's an AFC, which is an accredited financial counselor. And luckily, their annual symposium was in Columbus, Ohio, which is only about an hour and a half from where I live. So I was there for the last few days, repping Catching Up to FI, but connecting with all of my fellow counselors, coaches, and educators. And I have to say, one of the things I love the most about that conference or symposium was that the first morning, there was a breakfast for nonprofits. Now, I don't have my own nonprofit, but I do financial education with one of them. And they had this breakfast for all nonprofits in the Columbus area. And everyone ran around the room and talked about it with great pride, all the work that their organization was doing in the community and for society. And that just absolutely warmed my heart. And it was a one way to start a conference. So I loved it. It was great. So shout out to AFCPE and the leaders and the board. And this breakfast was sponsored by JP Morgan Chase. So I just loved it.
That's great. That's a good segue into our charity of the week. And we're going to support this week, or hope you support, the Father McKenna Center. Now, this is a charity near and dear to Frank Vasquez's heart, Uncle Frank, as we know him in our community. And Father Horace McKenna did dedicate, before he died, his life to service of people who are poor, marginalized, or otherwise pushed aside. So that's Father McKenna, McKenna Center.org. Frank will make sure your money gets to the right people. He walks the walk and talks the talk. So let's help out the Father McKenna Center in Washington, D.C. for the homeless, the poor, and the needy. All right. The review of the week, before we get on to our guest, is from Blovinger, Blovinger. I don't know who this is, but you win the review of the week this week. And they say that Catching Up to FI is a really great podcast for a really important niche audience. So many people feel like they're behind, but they present stories and information to help people get started wherever they're at. They're also realistic about what it takes to build your retirement. So thank you, Blovinger, for giving us a shout out. And we appreciate all of you that have the time to review us and hopefully give us 5 stars so that the message can get out there to others.
And hey, Bill, where do they go if they want to write their own review?
Well, they can go to Spotify or Apple Podcasts, and we check them out.
Yeah, we read every single one of them. So head on over to Apple. I know that they let you write a review. The Spotify lets you write a review. You can rate it. So you can rate it 5-star on both of them or whatever platform you're listening to. And if you're able to write a review, that is even better. And your review may very well end up on the show.
Okay, well, let's move on to our guest. We are so fortunate to have Monica Scudieri here. And hey, catchers, that's catchers. Thanks to Joe Salsihai for coining the term. It's time for a story. We do a lot of tactical and informational episodes, but as Brad Barrett of CUtFI says, it is the stories that make the world go round. Monica Scudieri is a scrappy, smart, second-generation Italian immigrant. She started late on her financial independence journey and finished early. Her personal and financial journeys are intimately intertwined, as we will learn today. Hers is a story of triumph over adversity. Not unlike my mother, my co-host Jackie, and a significant and engaged subset of our Facebook community, she did it as a late starting single parent. She did it her way. Monica, welcome to Catching Up to FI.
Thank you very much. It is an honor, and I'm really excited to be here to talk to you guys and talk to your audience, and happy to share my story. So thank you.
Right, Jackie? What do we think?
Yeah, we're thrilled to have you, Monica. And as you know, I was divorced myself. myself and was a single mom while I was on my fire journey. So I know how difficult that is. And every one of us have a unique perspective and our approach. So I'm excited to hear more about your approach, especially those Italian roots.
Yes.
Let's start there because this started with an immigration story and your parents come from humble means. Tell us about their story and how it impacted you.
So my parents came from a really small town in Italy, and most people don't even know that the region is called the Abruzzi region, and my family is from this very small town called Sulmona. It's basically just in the valley floor, and it's surrounded by mountains. And that is where they met. That is where they got married. And how they ended up in the United States is my dad got called to a tailor shop in Miami Beach. And so he accepted the job, married my mom, came to the United States. Well, my dad had been, because you had to serve military in Italy for 2 years. It was a requirement back then. But my mother had never left the town. And so she was not a worldly person. And then it's the 50s, the 60s where she grew up. So it's just a very different time. So my dad gets here. A year later, my mother follows. And back then, you didn't have a direct flight from Rome to Miami. You had to go up to New York, change planes, and come down. But my mother did not speak English. She did not know anybody. And so she's thinking, she gets on the plane, she gets here, and she's in New York, and she's looking for her husband and didn't know what to do. It was very stressful. It took, I don't know, hours to find somebody who spoke Italian to explain to her that her flight had left and that she had to spend the night in the airport and then take the first flight down to Miami when my dad picked her up. And then she got here. And my brother and I came soon after that. I'll say in the beginning, she did not like it here at all because the food is so much better over there. And plus, a lot of farmers in our family. So the food's super fresh. But yeah, so that is the start of my parents' journey of being here and everything they have. They became citizens of the United States in the 70s and very pro-US because they feel that they got everything from moving here and left everything behind. So yeah.
They were tailors, right? And how did they handle their money being owners of a small business?
So they did not have credit cards. Everything was pretty much cash business or checks. And if you didn't have the money, you didn't buy it. And that's how they ran things, very tight. My mother was really a magician. So she would get money to go to the grocery store and she could take $5 and make it look like $10 worth of groceries, which back then, very different than now. But yeah, she was amazing. And she was a phenomenal cook. A morning when she couldn't sleep, she'd get up and she would make homemade bread. So when I get up in the morning, the whole house smells like fresh bread. I remember one time over the weekend, she made some pasta, tagliafieno. So one made with spinach and the other one just regular egg pasta. And she had it made and she had it in the freezer because the next day they were having a client come to the house. And sometimes they would do that. I come home from school and I'm hungry because I'm a teenager and I go into the freezer and I find the spinach pasta and I'm like, oh, this is perfect. And so I pull it out, I eat all of it. And then my mother comes home and she's like, hey, how's it going? I'm like, good. It was a good day at school. She goes into the freezer. She's like, oh, maybe I put it over here. And so she's walking around and she's trying to figure out. And she goes, did you see any spinach pasta in that freezer? And I said, yeah. I said, man, it was really good. I was super hungry when I came home from school. And she was like, that was for dinner tonight. And she laughed and she goes, it's okay. I'll just make some more. And she did. And it was fine. But yeah, she was a phenomenal cook.
So they kind of lived, it sounds like, a bit of the American dream.
Absolutely. 100%. Bought a house, raised 2 kids. We both went through college. Yeah, absolutely the American dream. And really, I'm the first one to graduate college on both sides of the family. So yeah.
I think you mentioned that they never even finished elementary school. Is that right?
Right. Yeah. So neither one of them did. So I think one made it to 3rd grade. One made it to 5th, 6th grade. I mean, they didn't get very far. Really, they had to go to work. So they didn't go very far in school. But I mean, they were very entrepreneurial and they hustled. Yeah, it was absolutely the American dream for them.
Wow. So wait a minute, Monica. So they only had elementary school education, but they came to a whole nother country. Your mother didn't speak English. Boy, I definitely feel privileged on our end because we don't know how that feels to not speak another language. Like we go visit other countries and I can only imagine trying to navigate it, but they ended up running their own business, making money, learning how to do do the math with that. And that's truly amazing. So thank you for sharing that story. But did any of those money habits rub off on you? And you said your brother, you have one brother?
I have one brother. Yeah. So in the beginning, no, because you definitely go through those teenage years in the early 20s where you feel like, well, you grew up there, it's different here. And I went to college and I know. And so I started working when I was 15. And I remember because I grew up in Florida, my dad really, you couldn't start working until you're 16. So if you're going to start working at 15, you have to have a parent sign off on it, right? So I wrote this letter and I take it to my dad and I had asked him to sign it. And he's like, well, what's that? And I explained to him, I need to go get a job, but I need you to sign off that you're okay me working at 15. And he goes, well, why do you want to work? And I go, because I want to make my own money and I can buy my own stuff. 15. And he goes, why don't you just take the summer? You have your whole life to work. Just take the summer and do what you want and then start working next year. And I'm like, no, I really want to work now. And so he did. He signed off and I got my first job and I just spent all of it. And it didn't really hit me until later on when I went through my divorce. And then it was suddenly like, how did my mother do that? And it really just kind of hits you all at once. But no, not in the beginning, even though she definitely lived below your means kind of, but it really wasn't like, I didn't quite understand how it would be for my life. Live below your means. Okay, but what does that mean about me? How do I do that for me? And then I was like, I can do it later. I'm college educated. I'm going to have this amazing career. I'm going to have one job after another. My income's going to go up. And none of that happened. And it was just a big reality check.
So your parents must have retired at some point. They must have worked later in life, I imagine, too, because that was the generation. But how did they invest in their cash economy? How did they save and fund their retirement?
So my father passed away young, and my mother actually passed young too. But after he passed, she realized that she was all about cash. And so she basically stopped being a seamstress and she became a nanny. And that's how she basically made money until she got to Social Security. And because she still kept our house, it was too big for just her. And so she would rent out the bedrooms to make extra cash. And so between the Social Security and renting out the bedrooms and the nanny work, she was able to pay all of her bills. And then once the mortgage was paid off, then she got rid of the nanny job.
Well, she was an Italian hustler. She invented house hacking before house hacking was a thing.
Yeah.
Isn't that a movie, Italian Hustler? I think that's a movie.
It's I'm not familiar with it. I don't know. But yeah, she was amazing with money. She would always tell me, and actually it's in the book, I tell this story about how my mother would take one chicken and make 3 dinners out of it for us. And she would just take this one chicken and then she would take like the legs and the thighs and the wings and she would do one meal. And then she would take the breasts and she's like, well, people come over and then I just cut the breasts in half and then just make smaller pieces. And that's how she would do it. And then she would take the carcass and then she would make chicken broth and do soup with that. So yeah, she was really resourceful and she could do a lot with a little bit. Yeah, she was really amazing that way.
Well, we have a lot to learn from your parents. She can compound $5 into 10, a chicken into 3. That's pretty cool. I mean, we're going to be talking to the frugal friends, Jen and Jill, and she probably would be an awesome icon for them to talk about because she invented frugality. She invented house hacking. Your mom was on the cutting edge of finance back then.
Yeah, she really was. But she was so funny because like I remember taking her to work with me one day. I was all happy because this is when I lived in California and I had a job in San Francisco. So I'm like, oh, I'm going to take you to work. Everybody's going to meet my mom. And I'd never seen her so nervous. And I realized that she'd never worked a corporate job. She'd never been in the office, that she's a seamstress for people who go to these corporate offices. And she's comfortable in her space, talking to her friends and they speaking Italian as their primary language and English as a second. But when I took her to the office, it was suddenly like she didn't talk at all. And yes, and nice to meet you. And I was like, where's that crazy sense of humor of yours? Like, they don't believe me that, she's so quiet. I'm like, no, she really isn't.
Yeah, in a new environment, I guess.
Yeah.
Well, the American dream, your parents lived it and you kind of inherited it. But did it turn into an American nightmare for you is my question.
So when you're raised by parents who came from another country, there is a little bit, my mom and I, like mother-daughter, but there is a component of, it's like a love-hate thing. It's like they love you. My mom, I mean, absolutely, she loved me. And she was super proud of me and all my accomplishments and just brag about me me to her friends. But there was also this component of like, I sacrificed my whole life and now you have the life. And now my life is, I'm on the other end of it. And where's my turn? And so it's kind of a little bit of like, you're proud, maybe a little bit, I don't want to say jealous, but it's kind of like a double-edged sword kind of thing because you sacrifice so much. I mean, when I was writing the book, I sat there and I thought to myself, what would it take for me to leave everything I know, all my friends, my family, to go to another country where I don't speak the language, I don't know anybody, I have no money. I just try to put myself in her shoes. I mean, it's so amazing, like what she accomplished. It really just kind of humbles me. It really does.
It is, Monica. Kudos to your mom.
Yeah, thank you.
She was incredible.
And when I say the American dream, I mean, you went through college, your dad paid for it, and all of a sudden, let's just fast forward through, you got married, you had 2 kids, you had the white picket fence, you had the 2 cars, you had the pets, and everything seemed fine, but it ended up not being fine, right? And that's where the journey really starts.
Right. Yes. So we got married. We ended up moving out back east, and the marriage started to fall apart. And we decided together that we were going to go through this divorce. And the kids were preschool. My son was on the beginning of kindergarten. And so they were really too young to understand what was happening. And he was already traveling anyway. So in a lot of ways, it didn't really make much of a difference to them because they were used to him being gone until Christmas came along and they were like, what do you mean you're not staying? And then it was like, well, wait a minute. But with the divorce, I ended up taking on the marital debt and I took the house and the kids and the pets, which was fine. I was okay with that. And then he took the cash because I had the house. But that was 2008, before 2008 became very famous. And so I lost my job right after the divorce was finalized. And that's when things got really scary because I didn't have family here. It's just me and the kids. And I mean, I have the kids and then I can't afford to sell the house because the market fell apart. You can't take money out because all your stocks fell apart from your 401ks and all that. So there was really not a whole lot there. And I look back on that time, the entrepreneurship that my parents have, I feel like I inherited it because I started to cook for people to make some money. I started selling furniture out of the house because I'm like, you don't need all this. So I was selling that. I would dog sit for people, house sit for people. I did cooking classes for people. I just pretty much you do whatever you need to make ends meet. And then you have child support. And then I had unemployment, which was not a lot, but that's how I kind of skated through. And then so I had the unemployment, I was unemployed the first time for, I think it was 9 months. And then I got a temp job and then I lost that temp job and then I was unemployed again. I think it was 7 months. It got less each time. And then I had a job and it was a temp job. And then I lost that one. I was unemployed for, I think the last time was like 5 months. So I think it came out to like almost 2 years worth of unemployment. But it's so interesting though, because now my kids are adults. And one day I was asking them individually just to see what they say. And I said, when you look back on your childhood, when I was unemployed versus when I was working, which time did you like better? And they both said hands down when I was unemployed because I had all this time. So I'd volunteer at the school. I would do more cooking in the house. It's like not just bulk cooking and putting stuff in the freezer. This was more like, okay, the fish was on sale. And so come on over here and we're going to learn about this piece of fish and putting in the herbs from the garden kind of thing. And so we do taste tests and we do all kinds of stuff. And it was just very interactive. They didn't even notice that we had no cable in the house. Like they really, no idea.
Yeah, there's that time and experience over money. Now, at the time of your divorce, how old were the kids?
They were 3 and 5.
Okay, so they're little. Okay.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's so interesting that they like the time better when they just got mom more. That says a lot. And it's a great reminder that that's what's really important and that's what sticks with our kids.
It does. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I honestly thought they were going to say like when you had a job, but I mean, they saw how stressful it was. And even though you do your best as a single mom, you do your best to try to hide that from him. But kids, like they know if I had a particularly bad day, we'd get home and I'd say, okay, mommy needs a timeout. And my son's like, what do you mean you need a timeout? I need 5 minutes. And then I go upstairs and I do what I need to do to like just release whatever thing happened that day. And then I'd go downstairs and we'd get dinner and we had our routine and we just go about the day.
Well, and that's the hardest part about being a single parent because you do kind of have to do it all. And I don't know how the teenage years were, but that was kind of a really tough time for me because they're going through a lot of hormones going on and things like that. But you're rushing to pick them up from school or from after school care. You get them at home and you're juggling all this stuff. Well, you need your mental health and you just need a breather and a little bit of a break. So it is tough. You're juggling a lot.
Yeah.
So kudos to you for getting through that. That is tough.
Well, you both have had a similar journey there, starting at a similar time. And like I said before, there's a significant portion of our audience that are divorced parents, either father or mother, that are single parents and have to figure this out by themselves. Now, the thing you did, Monica, before this journey started, and maybe give us a snapshot of your finances at year one. But at year one, you said, in 10 years, I'm going to be a millionaire. And then for the first 4 or 5 years, it didn't go according to plan now, did it?
Oh, no. Oh, it was awful. I mean, I just felt like everything was conspiring against me. No matter how many times I would make a plan, I would try. It was like trying to climb a mountain with a mudslide going. It just kept pushing you down. So when I went through the divorce, I ended up with the house, but I had $257,000 of debt. And then half of that was the mortgage. And then the rest of it was just, I called it other because he was a spender. And so with my mom, I could hear her saying, live below your means, but I would just spend like up to my paycheck, whereas he would spend above the paycheck. And we both had family across the pond. So we would go and visit and like we were just living life. And so the money goes quickly both ways. When you're spending it and when you're saving it, it multiplies. And so that debt was really like the noose around my neck of, I never want to live like this again. And I don't want my kids to ever feel like this is how it is. And so I just made up my mind that is it arbitrary? I'm going to have a net worth of $1 million. And that's what it takes to become financially independent. And I just put that in my mind and I had that goal. And the first 5 years, it was, like I said, I hit unemployment 3 times. So it's 2 years almost of unemployment. So 3 years of working. And Jackie will tell you and your mom, like all these single parents, dads too, when you are a single parent, you can't have a job that's too far away. So it's got to be within a 30-minute drive. You cannot do overtime. You can't travel. You can't work the weekends. I mean, like there's a lot of can'ts in there. And there's going to be a whole list of people who can do all of those things and don't have a problem with it when you're a single parent, and you need flexibility. And back then, there wasn't this work from home like they have now. I mean, back then you were in the office and you dressed to be in the office. And so it was hard. There was a lot of guilt of putting the kids in before and after school care in elementary school because that's a really long day for them. But you do the best you can. And those are the cards you're dealt kind of thing. But yeah, so the first 5 years was tough.
There's an interesting comment from her son that I want to bring up here. And this was in the article that I read because at one point, your young son asked you, Mommy, are we poor?
Yeah, that was a big shock when he asked me that.
Like, Mommy, how are babies made? Mommy, are we poor?
Yeah, I have a baby story too. That's very funny. But
how did you feel about that question? And let's talk about what being poor really means.
Well, that's the thing, right? Is that he asks me this question, and I think he was in first grade. And I was kind of taken aback. And I said, why do you ask me that? He was just like, I don't know. I want to know if we're poor. And I told him, I said, we are not poor. I said, and the reason why we're not poor is because we have clothes on our back, we have food on the table, we have a roof over our head, and we have each other. I said, and so long as we have that, we are never poor. And it goes to your point, Bill, of your mindset, because my kids, thankfully, they've never been the kind of kids where they want the signature fancy sneakers or blue jeans. Like even now, my daughter's in college and she loves going to the secondhand store. My son's a minimalist, like none of this, to him, it's more stuff to keep track of and he doesn't want to do that. So it really just came down to it. And it became like the mantra. So long as you have clothes on your back, food on the table, roof over your head, have each other, you're fine. You're doing great. Because at the end of the day, those are the things that matter, right? Those basic needs and having friends that are good friends, having your family around, that's the stuff that really matters. And that was what they grew up with me.
So Monica, I'm still stuck on the fact that after your divorce, you've got these young kids, you are unemployed at least twice, you're trying to make it work. It must have been a struggle, but still you had in your mind that you wanted to be a millionaire. I guess what is going on in your head that made you think at that moment that I want to be a millionaire? And I'll point out that a lot of people will say, I don't know if $1 million is enough to live off of. You can debate that, but the millionaire and getting to $1 million, that means so much more than just a dollar figure. And you were there even when things were hard for you.
Well, that's interesting because poor is not a number, right? You've just decided to us, poor is not a number and rich is really not a number either. Many things in between there, but I think the average American equates poor with no money and rich, lots of money, but we're defining them differently here.
Yes, 100%. It's absolutely a very different thing. You could have all the money in the world and be very lonely and sad and and not have anyone around you, or you could have not two pennies to rub together, but you have a roof over your head and clothes on your back and food on the table. And you could be surrounded by loved ones all the time that come by and check on you and hang out. And I mean, at the end of the day, those are the things that matter. And that's what I've instilled with the kids growing up, is just having that.
Well, you can be poor but be rich, and you can be rich but be poor. It's almost like a square where you take rich on one side of it and poor on the other side of it, and then you intersect them, and it's mindset versus money.
Right. So those first 5 years, Jackie, you were saying about the $1 million, I didn't know if that was going to be enough or not, but it certainly sounded really good. And I thought, I don't know how I'm going to do this, but this is my goal. And what drove me was my kids. Like, absolutely. As a parent, as a mother, I'm very mama bear, and I didn't want them. And I'm sure, and sometimes I think about, like, with my mom, like, she did so much so that we would have better, right? And so I kind of was in that spot now of, I'm going to do what I need to do because I want better for them. But then when my son asks me this question, I'm thinking, they see everything. Like, you can do your best to hide it, but at the end of the day, they really do see what's going on.
There's a lot of parallels here, because if you think about it, you may have been living in the US, you may have been speaking English, but where you started at divorce was not so dissimilar from where your mom started when she came over to the US.
Yeah, I was so disillusioned because I thought, oh, I have a college education, I speak English, I can do so much more, and I'll be able to have this career. And that didn't happen. That did not happen. And I'm sure a lot of people can relate to that. Did you think it's going to be this thing? So you have to swallow your pride at that point. That's for sure. It was very hard for me to ask for help. But in those first 5 years, there were a couple of times, like, my car broke down and my mother would call and check on me. And I was like, well, the car broke down and I need like $400 to fix the car. And she's like, well, I'll send it to you. And she was on fixed income. And I'm like, no, don't send it to me. I'll figure it out. And she was very adamant because she was also a mama bear. And she goes, when you need something, I'm the first person you call and I will send you that money. And she did. She would send me money every so often, $200 here, $400 there, for various things that would break in the house, in the car, that the kids would need. But I kept a total. And so when I finally got a job where I was making some money and I was able to put some feet on the ground and I felt a little stable, when I went to go visit her, I came with a check and I was so excited and so proud because there was enough money. It was like a couple $1,000s at this point. And I said to her, like, I put it down on the dinner table and she looks at it and she goes, what's that? And I go, that's all the money that you lent me when I needed it. And she got so mad. She was like, what is that doing here? She goes, you better tear that up. I never want to see that again. She goes, when you need it, I give it to you, not because you need to give it back to me. I help you because you're my daughter. And she goes, I never want to see that again. We're going to have a big fight. But I have so much pride. I didn't want to keep it. So I took the money, I divided it into two, and I put it in both my kids' 529 so that I just gave it to them instead. So when the kids now they're in college and I tell them, like, this is from me and Nona. This is from both of us. So yeah.
So cool.
That is very interesting because my dad would react the same way. Like during the holidays for Christmas, when we got older, we wanted to try to get him something. He was like, don't you spend your money on me. And I never understood as a kid, why? Why would he be rejecting so hard as your mother did? And you know what? I have this burning desire. So you said your mother said, you better not give me that or something. Can you say that in a strong, mad Italian voice?
Yeah, she was like, Moni, ma, no make me mad. No making me mad.
Yeah, I could imagine. Okay, that really, this is giving me cinematography vibes. Now we know how Monica's mom sounded, but that was a great way for you to redirect it so that it still honored your mom and what she did. It still came full circle. So that was awesome. And it's so great that she was there to help you with as much as she possibly could. I love Mama already. What a great memory. So I'm wondering, when did you start tracking things and actually started making this $1 million net worth or whatever a reality? Like you had to kind of start somewhere with some real numbers.
Yeah. So I started after the divorce when the dust settled and, well, I lost my job. And so I calculated my net worth as it stood. And that's where that $257,000 is sitting there staring at me. And it took me like about 3-4 weeks before I actually did the net worth on paper. And so to make myself feel better, I actually would add a line item about what the car value was. And I added for clothes and furniture in the house, whatever I could add in there to make me feel like I didn't just have have $250,000 of debt. Like, it was ridiculous, but I'm like, well, I don't need all these clothes and I don't need all this furniture. And like, this is how I would justify adding it in. But as I tracked it, eventually I took those things off because we want it to be like all the way across. But I started the first year, and it's so funny because when I was married and when I was in college and whatnot, I tried goal setting, but I was terrible at it and never would achieve these goals, or sometimes I would. So I'm like, well, I'm just bad at it. And then I came across those SMART goals. And so I thought, you know what? I'm going to set some goals this year. Like, I really can't afford to fool around now. I really got to be serious about what I'm going to do. And so I set some goals for the year, and I thought, okay, I got 12 months. I'm going to get these done. And I got everything done in 3 months. And I thought, okay, well, it's okay. I got 9 months. I set myself another set of goals, and I wrote all those goals, and I got those done in 3 months. And so then I was like, okay, I'm going to just shoot for the moon. And so I was writing all kinds of stuff in my list of what I wanted to get done. And I had started making a parking lot of stuff that I was like, oh, at some point I want to add these. And I just started getting really creative, and it just started taking off. And what I learned that first year in the divorce was I was playing so small, and that I wasn't really using my full potential. And setting those goals really highlighted how small I was playing. It's how much I could really get done if I focused and made myself a direction like that $1 million net worth. And so that was a real eye opener. And it really started to change the way I spent my time, the way I motivated myself. And I tried different businesses just to see what would work out and what didn't. But so many of the things that I wanted to do required capital up front, which I didn't have. So those would go by the wayside. The only things I could really entertain are things that didn't cost anything to start, or very little. And so that's where I was just kind of selling furniture out of the house and cooking for people and just things to kind of make ends meet.
I want to know, because this is a 10-year journey to $1 million, and the first 5 were fraught with adversity. If you look back, Jackie did this in 10, 12 years with an income that never exceeded $100,000. What was it like for you? Was that the same story? What did your income trajectory look like over those 10 years?
Oh, the first 5 years, it was terrible because I was on the unemployment. I think one year, I made like $20,000. And then the next year after, I think I made like 18. It was just really bad, really small. And it was interesting because when you get divorced, you have the option to file together or separately. And so we had the tax accountant, and the tax accountant, he's very pro single mom. He's just very pro single parent. And so he did the math, and he calls me and he says, Monica, if you file together, you're going to end up owing like $4,000, and it's just not going to be good. He goes, but if I file separately, well, then he'll only owe $2,000, but you'll get $4,000 back. And I got to tell you, I was really struggling with that. I'm like, because I felt so guilty. And my girlfriend, I call her up and I'm like, so this is the situation. And she goes, and what's the problem? She goes, just file separately. And I'm like, no, because, and she's like, don't make me get on a plane, come up there, slap you, and then I'm going to come back down here. She goes, you do what you need to do because you have the kids. And I'm like, no, okay. So I tell my tax accountant, do it separately. And boy, we'll just say that he was mad, and I did not answer the phone. And it was a very unpleasant voicemail message.
That sounds familiar. Well, first of all, kudos to your friend.
Yeah.
Because that year, and this is the first year you get divorced, you have that option. And for me, I ran to my tax account and I said, put our daughter on my tax return, and I want to file before he files. So I was definitely thinking like your friend.
Yeah. So I filed. And then because you pay your tax accountant, right? So I paid him. And then so he went to my kid's dad and he wouldn't pay him. And so he had to take him to small claims court just to get paid to do the taxes. So like he was just very unhappy. And so because we have one of each, then I just said girls go with girls and boys go with boys. And even though they were with me, he still had one that he could deduct, and then I had one. So
Monica, how old were you at this point? And we're post 2008, right?
Yeah. So I started at age 40. And so after the first 5 years, that's when things started to turn around a little bit. I got another temp job that was 1 year contract, and with an option to extend for another 6 months, depending on this project. So I had the job, and there was a change in the market enough where I was able to sell my house. Finally found one person because the market was still very delicate at the time. And then I found another house. So I was able to downsize. And between selling the house and downsizing, but something smaller with a smaller purchase price, I was able to pay off that debt and put 50% down on this house.
Wow.
And so, yeah.
Things are looking up.
Yes. In one fell swoop, I was able to finally get out from underneath all of that. And then I opened up a home equity line of credit with the new house just to have that as like a backup emergency type thing. And that's when things started to turn around for me.
So you got to tell our audience that wants to know, because you accelerated your path to FI basically in 5 years. Take us through step by step. You ended up with 5 single family homes, I think, in a matter of 3 years. That's what got you independent, right?
Yes, absolutely. So here was the thing is that even though I had these temp jobs and they didn't match in 401k, but they did have a 401k. So even though I didn't have a lot of money, I still went ahead and signed up for the 401k. And even though it wasn't a lot of money I was putting in, but to me, it was you're building that muscle. You're learning to pay yourself first. And even if it's a lot of money, I was still putting money in the market every time I had a temp job. And then when I would lose the temp job, I would just take that 401k and roll it into my IRA. And then I would make sure to build up some emergency money to coast us through until my next job. But so I did that. And during my downtime, my unemployment time, I did a ton of homework. I read all kinds of articles. I read books. I read the whole Robert Kiyosaki whole series about real estate. I talked to realtors. I talked to property managers, friends that had property, and just learned the business because I really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed learning about it. And I thought, when I have some money, I think I'm going to try my hand at this. And just like the $1 million net worth lofty goal that I had, when I finally was able to get out from under the debt and move and have better pay, and then I finally got into a permanent job, it just things started lining up. And I finally used that home equity line of credit to buy my first rental property. And that's how I got into it, because I had all this homework already done. I had all this groundwork. And so when the money finally showed up, I was already ready. I already found a realtor that understood the rental property business. We already identified neighborhoods. I got pre-approved for a loan, which was no small feat, because when you're a single parent and I had a temp job, they don't count contract work as salary, as pay. Only the child support counted as a salary. And I remember being at the bank saying, I don't understand how that's possible, because if he lost his job, which he never lost his job ever, not one time has he ever been on unemployment, which was great because at least he got child support. But he was like, yeah, I know he could lose his job, but that's the bank's rules. And at first they said they were not going to give me a pre-approval, but I was adamant, insistent. I brought my numbers. I explained myself. I became friends with the branch manager. So he knew me and he went to bat for me with the lender. And so they went through and they rejected me. And then I came back and I said, look, I know I don't fit your profile of who you normally lend to. And I understand all of that. I said, I just need a chance. I just need you to give me a chance to get one property. And so he went all the way to the head of the lending department for the bank. And through a lot of persistence on my part, he went to bat for me. And ultimately they gave me a pre-approval to get my first rental property. And so with that in hand, and I already had my real estate agent. She already set up one of those reports where it automatically sends you the report of all the houses that are up for sale. I identified a few of them. We started looking, found one, and I went ahead and put a bid on it. And I used my home equity line of credit to buy it for cash, which this way you close faster. So that was something very appealing to sellers. And then I would go back to the bank and I'd say, okay, I bought this house. They would give me a loan for 80% of the purchase price. I do all the paperwork on the back end, and then I'd pay off 80% of the home equity line of credit. And then I'd work like crazy to do and pay off the 20% to clean off that home equity line of credit. And that made the opportunity for the next year. I could only buy one the first year. And then the next year, when I did my taxes and I showed that that property was giving me income, and between that and then I had now a permanent job and the child support, then they gave me a new pre-approval for 2 properties. And then I went ahead and bought 2. And then I did the taxes the next year, and then I got another one. And that's how I ended up with 5. And it's just like the $1 million. My goal was to buy 10, because why not? Why not say 10? And then when I started buying them and they needed an HVAC and they needed a roof and a water heater, like you got to figure out how to buy the property, find somebody to rent it, but then you got to do this work. And so it became this juggling, but I enjoyed it because it really was very interesting to me.
So what year did you buy your first investment property?
2013.
2013. And the market hadn't really recovered from 2008. So at the time, you didn't know how well they would do in the future, but the market was still still depressed. So you brought it a good time. And when you went on to buy the other 5, how quickly did you do that from the first one to the last one?
So the first one I bought in 2013, and then I bought 2 in 2014. And then in 2015, I bought 2 within 2 weeks of each other, which was very crazy. The way I did it was the last one, I kind of ran out of money, but I couldn't quite cover the amount that's on the home equity line of credit. And so I was talking to my property manager and he said, oh, you should call this other bank. They don't do it anymore, but they used to do this thing with the consolidated loan. So I had all these little mini loans, 5%, 6%. And so I said, this is all the loans I have. Can we consolidate it? And he goes, I can give you a 15-year with a 7-year term at 4%. And I'm like, 4%? That was saving me like $2,000 a month if I did that. It was a big deal. And so I signed off on it and then we started the paperwork and we did all of that. So yeah, it was something. And so then I started saving money on that end, which made me able to free up some money to do the repairs that I needed to do for the properties. And the other thing is that I took a chance because the areas, the neighborhoods I bought in were all up and coming neighborhoods. So they're like in the older part of town, but you have to look down the road, right? You have to look 10 years, 20 years down the road of where you're buying because this isn't a flip situation. This is a long-term hold. And so a lot of research went into the neighborhoods. But first, I was talking to a couple of my local girlfriends and they just thought, I cannot believe you're going to buy in those neighborhoods. It's kind of a little scary and it's sketchy. And I'm like, there's potential. Look at the way the city is growing. Look at where they're going to build. There's a lot of potential there. And so now it's 10 years later and they're like, I wish I did what you did. You know?
And now you do your research. And I think one of the big takeaways for our listeners and for myself is that even when you didn't have the money for the first down payment for the first property, you were doing your research. You were doing something. And then when the opportunity came, you were ready. That time you took to educate yourself and to do your research, it obviously went a long way and it served you very well.
Well, there's a quote from Oprah that you use, I think, in your book with regards to luck. You remember that quote with regards to luck happens to those that prepare themselves for it, something like that?
Yeah, I did. I liked putting quotes in the book because it's true. I mean, who's going to say it better than that? But it is true. I sit there and sometimes it's funny. I was talking to a friend of mine yesterday and I didn't do anything so special. I did what I needed to do. Anybody can read and do their homework and get themselves in the place so that when opportunity comes, they're ready for it. And my friend says to me, he goes, yes, that's true. People could, but not everybody does it. And that's the thing is that you dug in and you did what needed to happen and you muscled through it and it paid off. A lot of people in 2008-9 were taking money out of the market. I was putting money into the market and they thought I was crazy. They were like, I'm never going to put money in the market again. I know a lot of people, because now we're 2024, not everybody knows what it was like to live through that, but I still believed in it and kept the faith and did my homework.
So you've reached your 10-year goal. Now your net worth's over $1 million. You have 5 of what you originally said were going to be 10 rental properties. Why did you stop? Did you reach your enough?
Yeah, I did. I really reached my enough because I'm a hands-on learner. And so I felt like after 5, I thought it really is enough. This is good enough. The mortgage is going to come down and the rents are going to go up and this is fine. Like I don't need to continue to do more. So I just decided that was going to be it for that. And then I started looking for other things to do.
And now in the last 4 years since retirement, what has your net worth done in those 4 years?
You know what? It's the craziest thing. So I kept thinking, like people told me, you have your plan, you work the plan, and you're going to still see your net worth go up. And I thought, that makes no sense because I'm not getting a paycheck. I'm not doing my 9 to 5. And so aren't we just supposed to be burning that money down, right? You're using that money. But in fact, it has gone up. And now it's like it's almost at, I'm just south of 3 million. It's the craziest thing.
So when did you retire? So I can only imagine what those rental properties, those investment properties did for your net worth. So at what point did you reach financial independence and decide you wanted to retire? Like what year and things like that, so we can follow the timeline here.
Sure. So 2018, I reached my net worth of $1 million.
Yay.
Yeah. So it was really crazy. So I was just so head down and like looking for the next deal and doing the math and finding this place and let's go check that one out and going to work and the kids and the house and all that stuff. And then I do my net worth because I do it every year. And I'm like, I'm at No. And it really took me the whole year for me to go, that's real. It doesn't matter how many different ways you break it up, that you have $1 million in net worth. And it just crazy. So it took me a year to kind of absorb that. And then I thought I could quit. And then I got an opportunity at work to do something else that I was really interested in. And so I'm like, well, I want to do that. So I just switched over. I was always in IT. And so I went from project manager to a certified scrum master. And I had wonderful teams, great people under me. And so I stayed. And then 2020 rolled around and I'm like, well, I'm not going to be able to travel because now we have COVID and everything's on lockdown. So I'm not going anywhere now. But I still had my teams and we were having a good time. And so it really wasn't until March 2022 that I finally put my papers in and left corporate. And then the book came out in September 2022. And yeah, it's so much more satisfying. I don't make the money I made in IT, but I don't care because I'm doing things that make me happy. So I've done some traveling and visiting with friends and hanging out with the kids and just doing stuff. And it's not anything earth shattering, but it's mine. It's my life and just makes me happy. I do the volunteer work and that makes me happy. And yeah.
Look what you did and look what you do in sharing. Yeah. You share it with the book. You're a coach. I mean, for our audience out there, can they reach out to you and say, can you help me do this too?
Absolutely. And it's funny, I've had people reach out on LinkedIn just to say thanks for sharing your story, that they were raised by a single mom. I've had people email me at thegrabyourslice@gmail.com. I've had people go to the website at grabyourslice.com and you can connect on me through the website. And then the book is Grab Your Slice of Financial Independence. And that's on Amazon and Barnes & Noble. And yeah, I'm pretty accessible.
Well, in the article I read, you talk about it's never too late to start. And our audience needs to hear this. You are one of the famous late starters now. You talk about Martha Stewart and Ray Kroc, Kath Houston, Colonel Harlan Sanders, Julia Child, and Stan Lee. Your name comes right there with them because
yes.
You started late, finished early, but you found your enough and you didn't need to go further. And you've watched it grow because you take care of your garden, so to speak.
Yeah. And it's so interesting, that concept of enough, because when you're in that accumulation phase, you don't think about that. You're just moving, you're hustling, you're growing it. You do, at least I did. I got to a point, and not everybody does. I have friends who are like, no, I made it to 5 million. Now I want to make it to 10, or they make it to 1 million. They want to make it to 4. But like I made it to my 1. I was pretty happy, but I stayed working and did a few other things. But then I'm like, it's just time to go on to the next adventure, the next chapter. The key really was not running away from something, but running towards something. Because I lived it, Jackie, you lived it, very passionate about helping single parents. I mean, I saw one statistic this year, I think we had like 15 million single moms and 15 million single parents. It's like 3 single moms to 1 single dad, but the struggle is still the same. And it's hard because you don't have that support like you do when you have a spouse or when you live close to family. I mean, I didn't have that because I moved away from home. And I so want to show people that it is absolutely possible. You can do it. You just need to make some decisions about what's really important, where you're going to spend your money, and how those two come together, and how your spending supports the goals that you want in your life. And that is, at the end of the day, what matters. So yeah, very passionate about it.
Well, I'm just glad that you're sharing it with us today and that you're willing to share it with those in our audience who need to hear this story and want help getting there too. You have paved the path. We just need to follow it. And this is another individual story on the simple path to wealth. It's not passive income. It's real estate. It's a business, and you created a business in an entrepreneurial fashion, but it fit your mindset. Jackie, what do you think? Do you think we've helped a few people today?
I think so. And Monica, I do love your book. It's available on Amazon and wherever you get your books. And you said that was at grabyourslice.com. You talk a lot about it and you share your story in the book. I loved it. There was also a great write-up. I know a lot of our listeners may be familiar with the site, but it's esimoney.com. I will link to that in the show notes. But this has been inspiring. I love little fun facts. So as a single mom, one single mom to another, let me list a few high-profile people, amazing people that were raised by single moms. So he's kind of controversial, but Elon Musk was raised by a single mom. Jay-Z, Melody Hobson, Ben Carson, Julia Roberts, Jeff Bezos, raised by a single mom, and then Bill Clinton. So there's many more extraordinary people that everyone would probably know, great leaders that were raised by a single mom. And I know one day your kids will be able to say, I was raised by an amazing single mom. You definitely inherited inherited these amazing qualities that your parents have. I think when we grow up poor, we don't have much, maybe they don't leave a monetary legacy, but so many other things. So you gave us a gift of this book. You're giving us a gift of a beautiful story. I think sometimes as single moms, we do get stereotyped, like maybe you did at the bank, but you could have stopped there when you got rejected at the bank. You could have stopped and said, okay, they're not going to give me a loan, but you kept pushing. And that's what it takes sometimes when we're given this hand, we're dealt this hand. You overcame it. So I'm inspired. The whole real estate thing, I'm scared to death of real estate, but you took that on. So I'm inspired by another single mom. So I know we'll stay friends. And this was so great. We appreciate you taking the time and coming on with us today. I know that our audience will just love your story. Please pick up Monica's book. It's definitely worth the read. And we were just honored to have you today.
No, the honor is mine. You guys are doing fantastic work. I love the evolution of the podcast and everything that you guys are doing. I mean, kudos to you guys. Really, thank you so much for having me.
I met you at Economy before the podcast had even launched, I think. So at any rate, we've learned about what it's like to be poor and what it's like to have enough today. Those are the two things that I'm taking away from this, and the power of a single mom, I have to add to that. Women didn't always get access to credit cards, to money, to small business loans. These are things that have happened in the last 50 years. It's hard to believe that men held the purse strings on women for these kinds of things and had to co-sign for them up until not too long ago. And look what you've taken advantage of. This is a newer version of the American dream.
Absolutely. I will add to that a lot of times people say to me, oh, well, parents should be teaching their kids about finances. But when I think about like my mom and generations before, like they just didn't have the opportunities and the access the way we do today. And to your point, it was 1974, right? When women got the right to open a bank account and have a credit card without a cosigner. It was 1988. Women could do a business and get a business loan without getting somebody to cosign, male cosigner. So when I think about that, it really wasn't that long ago. And when you think about money and where it was controlled by men, and you're seeing more and more that shift happening, and women are becoming more breadwinner. I even see it in my own neighborhood. I love it. I love that there's that balance a little bit. And so it's fantastic. And it really is amazing what you can do when you put your mind to it. And I'll say, like, real estate is not for everybody. And even when I talk about it in the book, I say many times, this is what I did. I'm not saying that everybody should do this. This is what I did. But there are lots of ways to get into real estate without buying a single family home. So just do your homework and see what makes sense to you and make a list of all the different risks and how you're going to handle it.
Do your homework and luck will come to you, because luck does play a factor. I think of that banker that made the difference in your life when he says, I'm going to bat for you, and you were persistent. That was a pivotal point in life, and we just need to all find our way to negotiate our way to success when we know that we can succeed, and we're not thinking small, we're thinking big, just like you did.
Absolutely.
Monica, this has been a joy. Thank you for joining us this week on Catching Up to FI. We'll see you next week on Catching Up to FI.
So, Bill, as you know, we cannot do this show without our amazing staff and the people that help us put this on. Our social media maven is Diana Falk, and our editor is Fritz Brizard. We love them, and they keep us going.
Yeah, Jackie, I mean, this show wouldn't have the quality it has without our folks, our peeps. And we'd also like to give you a few calls to action for the show. We love our community, and we hope you love us back. If you would like to support the show and our mission to help late starters, you can do that at Buy Me a Coffee, which is a platform that allows you to make a donation. The link is in the show notes and on the website.
Check out the show notes for resources mentioned in today's show. Also, head on over to our website at catchinguptofi.com and check out our vetted resources, partners, and affiliates for discounts and their services, because we love sharing great deals.
Please share the show with others and head on over to our Facebook community to help us grow. If you prefer video, head on over to YouTube and watch the show there. We hope you've enjoyed this episode of Catching Up to FI. We would appreciate it if you could also leave us a 5-star review to help our message reach others.
And while we are financial educators that love to teach, remember that our content is for general education and information purposes only. We are not providing financial, legal, or tax advice. Always do your own research or consult a professional before making important decisions.
So, Jackie, we'll see our audience next time on Catching Up to FI. Cheers.